Lots to go through at the running back position. Here in a big week, you know what you're here for, so we're just going to get right into it. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support, and drop it down to tier 1. I've got Kyren Williams first up this week, along with Kenneth Walker at number 2. With Kyren Williams, he's coming off the bye week, taking on the Las Vegas Raiders, who just got shredded on the ground by Najee Harris. This is a fantastic matchup. You add on top of the fact that Kyren Williams may end up getting back Cooper Kupp, which I don't see how it hurts him because Kyren Williams has actually been running a little bit inefficient, so if he can get some help with Cooper Kupp this week versus a bad Raiders defense, yeah, I'm all over Kyren this weekend. And with Kenneth Walker at number 2 at the Atlanta Falcons here, listen, the encouraging part of last week with Kenneth Walker is that he was still able to produce a massive fantasy week on very low efficiency. That was the encouraging part because he got targeted, peppered with targets, and had like 7 receptions. It was ridiculous. So he's getting opportunities through everywhere. The coach said a couple weeks ago, yeah, we got to get him the ball a ton. They're going to continue to do that at the Atlanta Falcons this week. I've got lots of confidence with Kenneth. And then Saquon Barkley at number 3. It's the revenge game narrative at the New York Giants this week. I'm all over it. Listen, I actually don't particularly like this matchup with Saquon Barkley. He's coming off a couple straight bad games, and one of them last week was to the Browns off the bye week. I don't particularly love it, but I do love a good revenge game narrative, and it's worked out quite a bit this year. DJ Moore versus the Carolina Panthers, that one worked out pretty great. So I think that Saquon Barkley comes in with a massive chip on his shoulder. Eagles know that. They're going to feed this guy the rock, and I've got him number 3 this week versus the Giants. Dropping out to our next tier, we've got Breece Hall at number 4 and Joe Mixon at number 5. With Breece Hall at the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously he gets a new addition to his team with Davante Adams. Welcome to New York, because he's going to help open up the run game in a massive way. And the run game already looks really good with Todd Downing calling the plays instead of Nathaniel Hackett. So Breece Hall comes out, shows that he's bust-proof. This isn't a particularly strong matchup either against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but Breece Hall is bust-proof. Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson coming in to help shore up the passing game, and this is a situation where this offense will just be more open up this week. And by the way, Davante's the number 1 wide receiver over there. And then with Joe Mixon at number 5 at the Green Bay Packers, welcome back to Joe Mixon, right? I didn't have him in any teams. I ended up getting pounded by one of the teams that did have Joe Mixon last week because I was dumb enough to not draft him. Joe Mixon is a great player in fantasy. This guy is averaging about 20 fantasy points per game, and he's been absolutely outrageous if you take out the limited time that he had in week 2. Joe Mixon's been incredible. At the Packers this week, a beatable defense. That's a really good fantasy defense for other reasons other than slowing opponents down to a few points. Joe Mixon's going to have a good day, and they're going to ride him in this matchup. So I've got Joe Mixon at 5, and then Derrick Henry at number 6 at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I've got him a little lower this week. I've said it over the weeks. I think that with Derrick Henry, it's good and important to know that they're not going to ride this guy like a pony all year long. Like, this guy is in his 30s, and they want to keep him fresh because they want him for a playoff run. I mean, in the NFL, that's what they're looking to get him for, is a playoff run. So we have to take that into account. I believe they're going to beat the Bucs pretty handily in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a little bit of Justice Hill at the end of the game, and I think that Lamar will be able to toss all over the secondary. So Derrick Henry, of course, he's still elite. Of course, he still has a touchdown upside. You could basically guarantee at least 1 rushing touchdown a week for Derrick Henry, which is why he's still at number 6. But I do think it might be a little bit of a lower week. Dropping out to our next tier, James Cook, Jonathan Taylor are questionable guys with high upside. Obviously, James Cook was a massive surprise inactive this particular week against the New York Jets. And, you know, it was disappointing to see, but somebody raised this question to me the other day, and I considered it myself before the question, which is that turf toe usually, you know, this is an injury you don't want to mess with. Turf toe is usually like a month-long return. And with James Cook, I don't have confirmation that he has turf toe, but him being a surprise inactive against the Jets was definitely not a good sign. So obviously we're going to have to watch this one, but if he does play, we know the upside is great. They're committing to running the ball. They did it last week with Ray Davis. So the minute James Cook is back, they're going to commit to win him again. And the Titans matchup is excellent. And then Jonathan Taylor versus the Dolphins, the matchup is so freaking good. But again, have to see what happens with the injury. I've heard positive reports as if Jonathan Taylor might return this week from the high ankle sprain. It was said to be a more mild high ankle sprain, whatever the heck that means, because he's missed 2 games. So hopefully the mild part means he's not missing 3 or 4, and he's only going to miss 2. So if Jonathan Taylor plays, you've got to play him. He's got major upside versus the Miami Dolphins. And then J.K. Dobbins at number 9 around this tier. I told you guys weeks ago, buy this guy low. Buy him low, he's going to be just fine. And guess what? He was excellent against a really good defense versus the Denver Broncos. Now he takes on a much more beatable defense on a Monday night game at the Arizona Cardinals. I love J.K. Dobbins. This is already his backfield. Gus Edwards is on the IR, and Kamani Vidal was involved, but really just had that one big play on that catch that was like 40 yards. He's not threatening J.K. Dobbins' workload at all. This backfield is J.K. Dobbins, and they want to run the ball. J.K. Dobbins is an excellent play this week at the Arizona Cardinals, rounding out tier 3. Dropping down to our next tier right here. Jahmyr Gibbs at 10 and Chuba Hubbard at number 11 here. With Jahmyr Gibbs at the Minnesota Vikings, this is their first real test matchup, I think, because this is a really tough defense that they're going up against, right? And a really tough run defense for sure. So this one is a pretty clear answer to I prefer Gibbs over Montgomery by quite a bit this week, because Gibbs obviously doesn't have the great week last week, but that's because they were crushing the Cowboys and they just didn't need to use him out of the backfield in the passing game, right? Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a lot more needed this week. This is going to be a really close matchup here, and I do think that the Vikings and the Lions are going to be matching each other in points. So I want in on Jahmyr Gibbs because, again, I always prefer him because he has the explosiveness and he's got the pass catching upside. This is a good week for it because it's going to be a more competitive game where they need to get Jahmyr Gibbs into space like that. Chuba Hubbard at 11 and Bijan Robinson Jr. at 12. Same matchup. Obviously, Chuba Hubbard is running the backfield. Jonathan Brooks is starting to creep back into the conversation here. Maybe he returns. He likely won't. I'm reading they're targeting a week 9 return for him right now. But I don't really care. Chuba Hubbard's been so freaking good. Why would you pull the guy when he's averaging one of the few running backs averaging more than 5 yards per carry on the year? He's been been the most consistent offensive playmaker they've got. Chuba Hubbard's been elite in fantasy football. I've got no problem at all against the Washington Commanders in Washington this week. Yeah, I'm all in on Chuba Hubbard. Sue me. And then Bijan Robinson Jr., obviously he needs to play, right? Ends up not playing last week versus the Ravens here, but the matchup is so good that if he does play, even if he's on a little bit of a pitch count here, I think Bijan Robinson Jr.'s efficiency would be through the roof. Because I do expect Austin Ekeler to be able to play in this game if Bijan Robinson does go, just because of the fact that this is, probably not going to be 100% health if he does play. But the matchup versus Carolina is obviously elite. And Bijan Robinson's already been really elite in this offense with great efficiency numbers. So I like Bijan Robinson Jr. a lot as long as he gets to play this week. Alvin Kamara at 13 and Jordan Mason at 14. Again, 2 questionable guys. Kamara's probably going to play. He's been estimated on Monday and Tuesday's practice. So by the time you're watching this, maybe Alvin Kamara is ruled questionable. He's probably going to play though. But my concern with Alvin Kamara this week, number one, this team is riding him like a horse. I mean, he's being used everywhere, and he's the only thing they've got left. Olave's not playing in this game. Rashid Shaheed doesn't look like he's playing in this game. So it's what else do they have with Spencer Rattler there? They're going to check the ball down a lot, too. They just keep riding this dude so much, and he's older. It's he's not built for a major workload at this point of his career. He's going to be less efficient and he's going to be more injury prone. So versus Denver on a Thursday night game where they barely get any time to recover, I hate the matchup versus Denver, and I do really think that Alvin Kamara just may be becoming less efficient because they just have less options to be able to take pressure off of Kamara at this point. Still like him, especially when you're getting in a PPR league, but I do have a lot of fears with Kamara this week. And then with Jordan Mason, obviously if he plays, you gotta play him. I mean, Jordan Mason, literally the robbery that we experienced with Jordan Mason last week was so extreme. It was egregious. I mean, they should be tried in court. The fantasy injury people. He was on his way to an elite game before he got knocked out right before the half. He was so good. against Seattle Seahawks. Versus Kansas City, it's obviously a different story. This is a Super Bowl rematch here. Kansas City's defense is much better than Seattle's are. But with Jordan Mason, obviously that shoulder injury, that's a problem. I mean, this is an injury that sometimes lasts weeks. He may play in this game, and it kind of looks like he may be trending to play this game. But what are the chances he handles a full workload when they saw light at the end of the tunnel with Isaac Guerrero last week? Could be a little bit of a Bijan Robinson Jr. situation where he plays and he's a starter, but maybe he doesn't see the full workload. But obviously, if Mason plays, you still play him. And then Bijan Robinson at 15 round this tier out. Bijan versus Seattle probably is going to feel low. Probably going to get some comments talking about how stupid I am. Feel free, go down there, tell me about this one, because Bijan Robinson, let's address reality. He lost touches to Tyler Algier last week. And I get it. Tyler Algier and the Falcons, they ended up beating the brakes off the Panthers kind of late in that game, and Tyler Algier started to get more involved, right? Tyler Algier out-touched him and did almost just as good. Like, if you just look at it on a per-touch basis, they were both elite in that game. It was the Panthers' defense, the Seahawks' defense, as I was just saying, got run all over by Jordan Mason and that massive run against Isaac Guerrero last week. So the matchup is theoretically really good. My problem with Bijan is that he's just not handling the majority of the backfield right now. Like, Bijan, if he loses touches, he's not going to do that every single week. I prefer to sell Bijan high at this point. I think he's a great sell high candidate. Don't think he's a bad player, but I definitely have lots of issues with Bijan Robinson, as you could probably tell from me ranking him at 15. But I'll tell you what I don't have a problem with this week is Bo Nix's projection on Underdog, which is at 0.5 total yards. May take him a quarter, but he's obviously going to hit this one. And if you haven't taken advantage of Underdog yet, go down in the comments and grab the link that's there. And when you use code FFN to sign up for Underdog, they'll match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 bonus cash, and you'll be able to take advantage of this sweat-free projection of Bo Nix. You got to hit the higher on this one this week. Dropping down to our next tier right here, James Conner at 16 and David Montgomery at 17. With James Conner versus the Chargers, you know, he has a down week again last week. And really my main problem with James Conner is that this offense is so hot and cold, right? Like, and this is a tough matchup right here. Versus the Chargers, I don't know how effective their offense is going to be versus a really, really good defense again. So I have problems just with the hot and cold nature of the Cardinals offense here, but obviously Conner is primed for big explosive games. He handles the majority of the backfield, although I will say Trey Benson's starting to get a little bit more involved, so maybe watch on that one, but I'm still not concerned about that. It's mostly just a concern about how hot and cold this offense is. That's why he's at 16, and then I've got Dave Montgomery at 17. Again, probably feels low, especially coming off a big week. For those of you who've been watching my channel for years, I love Dave Montgomery. You know it, and I know it. This is not a great matchup, I don't think. At the Minnesota Vikings, coming off a bye week, the Vikings are, and their defense has been absolutely lights out against everybody. I mean, they're barely letting points happen, unless it's to wide receivers. The David Montgomery train this week, I think, comes to not a halt, but it's going to be tough sledding. Like, his upside is definitely going to be touchdown or bust, because I don't think he's going to see the level of efficiency this week. I think this is more of a Jahmyr Gibbs game. This is their first real test as an offense right here. And I just prefer Jahmyr Gibbs very, very heavily over Montgomery this week. While I still think he's top 20 because he's been really good, really efficient, and he's obviously running behind the best O-line in football, I do think he's a touchdown or bust this week. Tony Pollard at 18 and Tyrone Tracy Jr. at 19. Tony Pollard has a big week, and I think that he's in line for a good week against Buffalo. Like, the Buffalo Bills are getting run all over by teams, and, you know, Tony Pollard, obviously, he's the only, like, good functioning piece on this offense, because Ridley's functional, but he's dysfunctional because of Will Levis. They're not benching him this week, so that's a problem with Ridley. They're going to be using Tony Pollard a bunch still, and this matchup just works out in his favor. The only reason he's down here at 18 is because I hate this offense. Like, they are so just prone to, like, doing nothing, in my opinion. This team's about to crumble. The locker room is crumbling around Will Levis. They don't like the guy, I don't think. So, with Pollard, I consider that definitely a negative here, but of course Tony Pollard is a very good play versus the Buffalo Bills. And then Tyrone Tracy versus the Eagles, I think it's a really good low-key play. Like, obviously, Devin Singletary, with him being in or out, is going to affect things, but I was reading this from a Giants beat reporter. Take it with a grain of salt. These beat reporters are sometimes morons. But this beat reporter did say, I actually think that Devin Singletary may have been usurped as a starting running back. Tyrone Tracy has been so good, and this coaching staff likes him. And I've been saying that for a while. I do think this coaching staff does really like Tyrone Tracy Jr. He's effective in both the run and pass game. He's just been better than Devin Singletary. So even if Singletary plays, I think that Tyrone Tracy may start to take over this backfield. And especially if he's not there, good luck stopping Tyrone Tracy. This guy is effective in fantasy because of the run and the pass, and I like the matchup versus the Eagles this week. And then Kareem Hunt at 20 to round it out. At the San Francisco 49ers, don't love the matchup. This is not a particularly great matchup, but the 49ers defense still has continued to be banged up, and they are giving away fantasy points to running backs. Kenneth Walker, not efficient last week, but was definitely involved in fantasy football. Kareem Hunt off the bye week. The Chiefs are really, really good off bye weeks. Andy Reid's record off a bye week is really good. And Kareem Hunt, I do think, is going to have a good opportunity here because he plays for the Chiefs. There's really not much deeper analysis than that because you want Chiefs offense, and Kareem Hunt has looked really good for them. Dropping out to our next tier. Tank Bigsby at 21 and Nick Chubb at 22. Tank Bigsby is taking on the Patriots overseas, and I actually think this benefits the Jags this week because this is their second week overseas now. So they're in the same spot, and they're just chilling, right? They're getting used to that environment over there, and this is just a much better matchup than he had last week versus the Bears. And of course, the big news is that Travis Etienne, he's week to week, so he's not going to be playing in this game. Tank Bigsby versus the New England Patriots, I think this is actually a really good matchup for Tank Bigsby. And you might hear me talk about him a little bit more today, so stay tuned for that next video. And then Nick Chubb looks like he may be making his illustrious return. I cannot wait for this. Can't wait to see Nick Chubb back. Versus the Cincinnati Bengals, the matchup is really good. Now, I will say this. I don't think Nick Chubb is going to come in and handle normal Nick Chubb workload. I think he will definitely handle like max 15 carries this week. I mean, it's just like, how do you come off an injury like that and handle 20 carries? I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that Deonta Foreman will be involved in some way, shape, or form. But Nick Chubb, I think, definitely raises the ceiling of this offense as much as he can. It'd be better if he played quarterback, but I think that Nick Chubb actually is going to have a good week in this matchup versus Cincinnati this week if he ends up playing in this game, which, by all accounts, looks like it could be the case. Josh Jacobs at 23 and Chase Brown at 24. Josh Jacobs just addressed reality, man. This guy is not being used in the end zone. He's still sharing touches with Emmanuel Wilson, and it's just not working out in fantasy. By all metrics, it should. It still baffles me how this one's not working out. But versus the Houston Texans, I don't think the matchup's great. I don't think it's terrible. But Josh Jacobs, I just don't know what to expect, to be completely transparent with you guys, on a week-to-week basis with him. Sometimes he handles the majority. Sometimes it's a straight-up 50-50 split. But one thing's for sure, doesn't have red zone upside. So unless he's getting a big run, he's just not having that much upside. And then Chase Brown at 24. At this point, I think everybody's on board. Chase Brown over Zach Moss. It's not really close. Chase Brown's the better option there. And versus Cleveland this week, at Cleveland, obviously the matchup is not as great as it was a couple weeks ago. They just kind of shut down Saquon Barkley. But Chase Brown in this offense with Cincinnati gets reception work as well. He's had a nose for the end zone. So I do think that Chase Brown is definitely the back that you want at this point between him and Zach Moss. It really comes down to, can he get in the end zone versus a tougher matchup with Cleveland. And then Achane at 25. Achane this week, he's taking on the Colts in Indianapolis. I think the matchup's really good, but again, it's like I said with Tyreek yesterday. Wake me up when Tua is back. Seriously. I mean, this matchup literally couldn't be much better, but this offense just stinks without him. And he's already questionable in this game because he had a concussion before that bye week that they're coming off of. He donned a non-contract jersey on Monday. We'll see what he looks like on Wednesday in practice, but I mean, Achane just doesn't have much upside without Tua, as the rest of the Miami Dolphins offense does. So I like him over the next tier because I think he definitely, obviously still provides upside, but I'm leery on this one. And the next tier, we've got the last one. Starts out with Ramondre Stevenson at 26 and Bucky Irving at 27. Ramondre Stevenson is questionable. Obviously, we're going to have to watch this one throughout the week. But again, I like the matchup. Jags defense is so atrocious. They're so freaking atrocious. That defensive coordinator looks like a moron. He doesn't even know what he looks like he's doing. So Ramondre Stevenson, again, you look back to that game before he missed last week versus the Dolphins, he did really well in fantasy. Like, this is his backfield, and without Ramondre, Gibson did nothing last week. So I like Ramondre if he plays in this matchup versus Jacksonville. And then Bucky Irving at 27 versus the Baltimore Ravens here. It's the Monday night game. I think Bucky, from all accounts, looks like the best running back in this backfield, all things considered. Obviously, Tucker has a big game, but that was really when the game was starting to get out of hand late in that game. And so Bucky Irving, I do believe that with or without Rachaad White at this point, he separated himself as kind of the lead dog a little bit. Now, I've heard talk of like a three-headed monster. That's not great for fantasy. That's why Bucky Irving's down the slope. But based on efficiency, based on what he did last week, I do think he has a decent opportunity. But the matchup stinks, and that's why he's also this low. 28 Austin Ekeler and 29 Ty Chandler. Austin Ekeler, as I said earlier, Brian Robinson Jr. may be back, but he may not be. And either way, I think Ekeler has upside versus the Carolina Panthers. This matchup is elite. So if it ends up Brian Robinson doesn't play, Ekeler's going up to like top 20 without question. I know he didn't do it last week. They played the Baltimore Ravens. That's a tougher matchup than the Panthers are. Let's get that clear. So if Ekeler doesn't have Brian Robinson Jr., he goes up. If he does have Brian Robinson, this is where he's at. And then Ty Chandler probably gets the start with Aaron Jones still dealing with the injury. I've seen some positivity around Aaron Jones, and obviously if Aaron Jones plays, he's going to be up here in like top 15 territory. But with Ty Chandler, it looks like he's probably the safest bet as of this point in time, filming tonight on Tuesday night, to say he's probably going to be the starting running back. But again, we'll have to see how this one goes. I don't really like Ty Chandler. I hate the matchup, so I don't have much upside for him. But if it's Aaron Jones, that's a totally different story. And then rounding it out at 30, Najee Harris, not buying into it. Big week last week, first 100-yard game of the year versus the Jets. They just got ripped apart by Ray Davis. I just, like, with Russell Wilson starting this week, this offense has very, very little upside. It will look very similar to what it did last year with Kenny Pickett. I mean, seriously, Russell Wilson doesn't push the ball down the field. This is going to become a one-dimensional offense, and Najee's going to suffer as a result. So with Jaylen Warren back getting a little bit more touches versus the Jets, I think they have a rebound week defensively. Don't have tons of confidence with Najee, but obviously he's going to lead the backfield. And as I do at the end of every rankings video, I give you my favorite running back underdog pick of the week if you're playing an underdog best ball drafts on a weekly basis. And Alexander Madison's the best guy outside of the top 30 for me because he just has a nose for the end zone. I mean, listen, like, I don't know how he's doing it, because he stinks, and he hasn't been very good on an efficiency basis, and the offense sucks, but he's finding the end zone. And the Rams defense is bad. So this is an opportunity I would take advantage of in a best ball format. So let me know how your team looks this week, and if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for this week, click on this video right here.